Welcome to the 2 Degrees C Climate Chat podcast, your weekly guide to what's happening within the climate around the world. My name is Neil Vinnikirk, the Executive Director and a founding member of 2 Degrees C. Along with co-founders Dr. Carsten Schein and Jenny Dissen, we cover issues relating to the climate crisis. So join us as we explore in the 2 Degrees C Climate Chat. Welcome back to the 2 Degrees C Climate Chat podcast. Coral reefs have a global ecological and economic importance and are a fundamental component of marine ecosystems, supporting about 25% of all ocean biodiversity. Our guests today, Peter Hillenbrand and Dr. Gretchen Goodbody Gringley, introduce us to the Central Caribbean Marine Institute and their Little Cayman Research Center, which is located on the island of Little Cayman in the Cayman Islands, just steps away from the world-renowned Bloody Bay Marine Park. CCMI is a fully operational research institute, open throughout the year, and includes an in-house team of researchers, as well as many visiting researchers and education groups. So join us as we explore in the 2 Degrees C Climate Chat. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again for the 2 Degrees C Climate Chat podcast. Joining me again today, Dr. Carsten Schein, and our guests today, Peter Hillenbrand and Gretchen Goodbody Gringley from the Central Caribbean Marine Institute. Carsten, before we bring Peter and Gretchen into the conversation, I wanted to just have a chance to ask you for your opinion on the way that climate change is affecting small island nations.
So, obviously, it's affecting them in many ways. One of the most pronounced ways that we're seeing in the news these days is with sea level rise is actually inundating these islands, and some of the lowest lying islands on Earth have already disappeared under the waves, and some habited islands are starting to see flooding on a more regular basis. And in a few decades may also join their neighbors in being submerged. Another important aspect is, as we chatted about last time with coral bleaching, is that a lot of these island nations rely heavily on the dive industry for tourism and such. And as reefs are degraded and mangroves are lost and such, that really has a profound effect on tourism in those places.
Now, you actually had the opportunity to go down to the Central Caribbean Marine Institute, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, the CCMI is really part of 2 Degrees C's origin story. That I was down there in about 2016 or so, 15 and 16, doing some research on coral reefs down there and local scale climate variability. And really was putting sensors all over the reefs around the island. And the recreational divers that were coming off boats would swim over, see what I was doing. And that evening I had to go and explain it to everybody in the resorts. And you know, a lot of the divers were like, how can we help? And that was where this idea was really born about having citizen scientists carry the instruments that we as scientists need to collect the data that we analyze.
Joining us today, Peter Hillenbrand and Dr. Gretchen Goodbody Gringley from the Central Caribbean Marine Institute. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Good to be here.
So maybe we can start with you, Peter. You're the chairman of the board, is that correct?
That's correct.
And Gretchen, you're the director of research.
Yes.
Maybe you can do a little introduction for the listeners, just so they know your background and how you came to get involved with the Central Caribbean Marine Institute.
You want to start that, Peter?
I was actually one of the founding members in 1998. Myself and Dr. Carrie Manfrino got together, ran a couple of school programs and some research projects down here through my resort, the Southern Cross Club here on Little Cayman. And we decided to try to raise the money to start the Institute. And we actually got Prince Edward, the British royal family, involved, and they've been our royal patron ever since. And the Institute has grown very nicely. I was the chairman for the first 16 years. And then I took a bit of a sabbatical and took 5 years off and just became chairman again in January of this year.
Fantastic. And how about you, Gretchen?
Well, I'm a research scientist, and I was previously working in Bermuda at the Bermuda Institute of Ocean Sciences. And I met Dr. Manfrino at a conference in London several years ago. And we began chatting and talking about Little Cayman and how amazing this site was in terms of the health of the reef. And she brought me down here 2 years ago. And then a year ago, I came on as the director of research.
That's great. Now, for those of you that are listening, Little Cayman may not be on your radar at all. It is kind of removed in the Western Caribbean, but it is actually a diving mecca. And I know, Peter, that's how you got your start there, as you mentioned, because you are, in fact, a hotelier and I have a resort. So I had a question for you about, what prompted you as a hotelier to really delve into marine research?
I actually was in the process of becoming a marine scientist and applying towards graduate schools when the opportunity to buy the Southern Cross Club here on Little Cayman plopped itself in my lap. And it was a pretty hard decision, but I decided to change careers and become a hotelier in a foreign country. And that's the way I became a hotelier.
Coming up next. So, Peter, I had a question, being a hotelier and with your understanding of climate change, how has this allowed or developed your sustainability with regard to, the way that you direct the club? When we return to the 2 Degrees C Climate Chat. Blue Ocean Art is the premier collective of marine artists and a proud partner of 2 Degrees C. From some of the world's most renowned underwater photographers to painters, sculptors, and multimedia artists from around the world, Blue Ocean Art's large collection features moving imagery showcasing the beauty of the world's oceans. Our artists' passion to capture the moments and special places in our oceans affords the rest of us a glimpse into that mystical realm that makes up so much of our planet and has a deep impact on all of us, yet we know so little about. Our shared interest in protecting the environment means we look forward to using the Leaf Climate Sensor on our projects and trips as soon as they're able to reach the critical next stage of product development. Visit www.blueoceanart.com to see their selection of fine art prints and decorative products to bring the beauty of the world's coral reefs and underwater environments into your space. Listeners of the 2 Degrees C Climate Chat podcast can exclusively take 25% off with the code 2 Degrees C at checkout.
Hey, this is Megan Haney-Greer, freediver, ocean explorer, and marine educator from The Imperfect Conservationist. And you're listening to the 2 Degrees C Climate Chat podcast.
So, Peter, I had a question, being a hotelier and with your understanding of climate change, how has this allowed or developed your sustainability with regard to, the way that you direct the club?
We certainly want to have the smallest footprint we possibly can, staying within the laws of the Cayman Islands and the economic realities of running a small 14 beach bungalow resort. Diving itself, it's running dive boats with big diesel engines, and our rooms are air conditioned. So, we have a pretty heavy carbon footprint here, but whatever we can do to mitigate our energy consumption, to make guests aware of how they are impacting the reef, and how we can keep our footprint as small as possible while providing the experience of a relatively pristine marine environment. We do it. We do everything we can.
Yeah, I would say that the latter part of that is what's really important, because people protect what they love and what they know and what they've seen. And so giving these people the opportunity to see a Caribbean reef, which has been less impacted by some of the major impacts that have affected other locations, they can actually make that connection. And then maybe when they go back to their everyday lives, they're thinking about how they can make a change and how they can then do something in their lives to help protect what they have seen and witnessed.
Yeah. And I know, Peter, you the Southern Cross Club has a Green Globe certification. That's correct.
Correct.
Yeah, and so that process, I believe, involved the Cayman Islands government. So as I understand it, the Southern Cross Club is one of the only resorts in the Cayman Islands to actually have attained that certification.
Correct.
Right.
I'm curious, what does that certification mean?
It's an international certification that means we are meeting the standards that the Green Globe community require to consider yourselves an environmentally friendly operation.
You're listening to a conversation about climate innovation. Coming up. So, Gretchen, as changes take effect, what mitigations and adaptations do you believe will take place in Little Cayman where CCMI is? That's up next when 2 Degree C Climate Chat continues. With so many wonderful destinations around the world to choose from, a little help can go a long way. Quest Dive Adventures is your premium adventure travel company, offering a wide and diverse selection of destinations to choose from, with dive adventures from the Pacific to the Caribbean and adventure travel from Costa Rica to Africa. Quest Dive Adventures offers packages including flights and accommodations, activities, transfers, diving, and more. Everything to enjoy your perfect vacation. What's your request? So, Gretchen, as changes take effect, what mitigations and adaptations do you believe will take place in Little Cayman where CCMI is?
Well, I think by increasing that marine protected area will obviously have a huge impact. There's a lot of data that has shown the impacts of marine protected areas on local fish populations. And so I think with the government on board to increase our MPAs, that's a huge step forward. I also think our work towards restoring the acropora populations with our coral nursery and some of the work that we're looking to do, looking at selectively outplanting populations that have higher temperature tolerances, will help to rebuild that structure of the reef and maintain its integrity as well as the function of the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we have a lot of community involvement. So here on Little Cayman, there's a continuous culling that takes place for the invasive lionfish. And so the community is very involved with that. And we also involve them frequently with helping us out with our nursery corals and helping outplant corals. So any way we can get the community involved helps them to really feel ownership of our conservation efforts. Mm-hmm. So I feel very confident in Little Cayman as this little gem of an island, really, in the Caribbean.
The community here really supports our cause as well. I mean, the community here is very conscious of the both terrestrial and marine environment and how fragile it can be.
That's great. I know that Little Cayman has quite a large amount of seagrass, and seagrass, so far as we understand, has quite an effort in carbon offset. Is that correct?
That's correct. It does. Just like even the tiny dinoflagellate or algae that are floating in the seawater that you can't even see actually absorbs a large amount of CO2 from the atmosphere. And so does seagrass. So, maintaining that ecosystem integrity is really important to mitigating climate change.
That's great. So are there any opportunities for the listeners to get involved with CCMI, even though it's distributed on a little island in the Caribbean? Are there ways for folks to get involved and participate?
Sure. One of our strongest suits is that we have educational programs for K to 12. So we run camps for international students. We're always looking for young early career scientists to come down and do an internship with us or do their graduate research with us. So young scientists, we're always looking for them to come and learn from us and work with us and conduct their research in what we consider to be a relatively pristine environment for the Caribbean. And then for the layperson, of course, listening to things like our webinars and our Reefs Go Live episodes, which are underwater live broadcasts that we do every once in a while. We'll have one on March 26th. So that's a shameless plug for our first Reefs Go Live of the year, which will actually broadcast from Georgetown Harbor in Grand Cayman, where we will present the results of our COVID-19 study.
www.reefresearch.org.
That's right.
Reefresearch.org.
Also on Facebook, right?
We are also on Facebook and Instagram. Yes.
Awesome.
That's fantastic. Well, I want to wish you both thanks and for all the efforts that you're doing, and wish the Southern Cross Club and the Central Caribbean Marine Institute all the best for the future. And just as Peter said, reefresearch.org and the southerncrossclub.com if you'd like to know more. And thanks, guys. Thanks for coming and joining us for the Climate Chat podcast today.
All the best to 2DC.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys.
You guys.
Okay, Carson, let's pivot towards the news. And for those of you that are just joining us for the first time, 2 Degrees C does have a newsletter, and it's available at our website, 2degreesc.org. It's called the 2 Degrees C Climate Check. When once a week, we'll send out 3 climate-related news articles that we found interesting, as well as a new scientific report. Just once a week, just the facts. So today, Carson, sticking with the theme of islands, I did want to talk about sea level rise a little bit. There's quite a bit of news circulating about Antarctica's ice sheet. Can you help us understand what's going on and why that particular news story is making the rounds?
Sure. This was the result of a couple of recent journal articles that came out in the scientific literature that were looking at some of the new climate models out there that are being used in the next IPCC assessment report. And these models were suggesting that under a low emission scenario of capping things to 1.5 degrees Celsius, we'd still see the ice melt contribute about 13 or so centimeters to continued sea level rise over the next 70 or so years, 70, 80, I should say about 80 years. And under sort of the high emissions scenario, which we're still on somewhat of a trajectory to meet, that number goes up to about 42 centimeters, which is quite substantial. The big thing is that, so over the last 100 years or so, it's been about sea level rise has been under about 10 centimeters. So it's not been that great, and about half of that is just under half of that is due to glacial ice melt. So this is projected to actually accelerate under these new climate models, which has some pretty significant consequences for low-lying islands and such, and low-lying coastal areas that are already prone to flooding or storm surges.
So this is already happening here in the U.S., and I'm aware of one instance where the U.S. government has already had to relocate a Native American settlement out in Louisiana. And also in local news in Florida, I saw that the governor is actually signing some legislation into action specifically regarding sea level rise. So if we think about you referenced to low emissions and a high emissions, where are we on track right now to meet?
Right now, we're still on track to go for the high emission scenario. There are in the new climate models that are being developed, there are some interesting middle ground scenarios that do suggest, okay, the emissions keep going up for a number of years, but at some point, about 2050 to 2070, those emissions start to drop off dramatically as we get a handle on things, either through policy or technology. But those emissions will stay in the atmosphere for a long time to come afterwards.
And of course, that ice is not waiting; it's melting as we speak.
Ice waits for no one.
Right, and the ice itself also has a different interesting aspect in that it releases nitrous oxide, right?
It will release whatever chemical constituents it had trapped within it when it froze.
Right.
So I mean, ice itself is still water, frozen water. So,
right.
But as it freezes and compacts, it compacts with trace gases that were in the atmosphere at the time that it compacted. And when it does melt, those are released back into the atmosphere. And actually, we're seeing some of that with methane in the permafrost areas, where
Gotcha.
The permafrost is starting to melt, and it's releasing some of those trapped organic emissions like methane into the atmosphere.
Right. Well, we'll be watching this one closely. Thank you, Carson, for helping us explain. And we'll wrap up some news in the next episode. Thanks, Carson.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of the 2 Degrees C Climate Chat. If you have a question you would like answered, a topic for discussion, or would like to be a guest on the show, please leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your stories and climate journeys, and if you like what you've heard today, please like, subscribe, and comment wherever you hear your podcasts. Next week, we'll be interviewing Laird Akins, the Curator of Marine Conservation for Frost Science, so be sure to check back in then, or find out more about the stories you've just heard by visiting our blog at 2degreesc.org and connect to others like you via our social media. We'd love to hear your stories and climate journeys, and if you like what you've heard today, please like, subscribe, and comment wherever you hear your podcasts. Thank you to our sponsors and partners without which this podcast is not possible, with special thanks to Seren Media for producing today's episode. To find out more about our partners, please visit our website, and if you'd like to become a sponsor or partner, please email us at podcast@2degreesc.org.